that they don't infiltrate as an order, normal order of operations. Knowing how they operate, use your best mind, be honorable, and be active, be proactive. Try to get out of the habit of being reactive, because you lose. You do. And, you know, I don't like to play the alarm game, but the people are in more trouble than they really even imagine that they are. Hopefully that some of the things that we've been telling them, that they're really going to be self-inspired to be active, to study.
Can you hold this book up? People are asking about the book.
This is the book, Neotech.
Yeah.
Is it clear?
Higher. Yeah, there you go. Neotech. Frank.
Do I need to put it closer?
No, come back, back up. There, they can see it. Neotech. Let's see how thick it is. Yeah, it's a thick book. Neotech. Frank R. Wallace. I think you see it. Okay. So, there we go. You want to get that book.
Now remember, and this is one of the things that they always do, because while you think they're silent, they watch us and they always plot on how to counter us. And this is people on our side as well as the hybrid Europeans. Whenever we try to wake the people up, understand that they're going to attack. Understand that's normal operations. And for those who are listening here tonight at the House of Reawakening Minds, if you intend to get this book, whatever's available, get it now, because I'm telling you, as soon as this gets out, they're going to be out there jumping, trying to make it non-available. I'm telling you how they're going to do. So don't say that we didn't tell you. We can't make you act. We just trust that you love yourself enough to act. And you know, our people invest fortunes into sneakers, but they just don't believe in books anymore. However, we're encouraging you to go ahead and start taking care of your responsibilities.
Yeah, we thank you so much. We thank you for those who support us and tune in regularly. Tune in to Office Hours with Dr. G on Tuesday. And ironically, Grand Sheik, my guest, is going to be an expat that domiciles in China and is bridging the gap between China for Moors around the globe and China to be able to do imports. So he's changing.
We need the paradigm.
And so he's going to be my guest on Tuesday. And he's also, he does it through a lot of things, through fashion and so forth. But he speaks fluent Chinese and writes and reads fluent Chinese as well as Moorish Latin and English. So he's going to be my guest on Tuesday night, and it should be a very exciting.
Oh, beautiful. Because we need that, and also that venue of information and thinking should be adopted into the consular venues. That's what the consular venues are for.
Yeah.
See, and even like when people hear the structural phrase "adab chamber," most people aren't aware that adab chamber is in place universally for receiving diplomatics and ambassadors. They think it's just, higher degrees of more science within the temples. No, it has a political function. Okay. And for those of you who doubt that, do a little bit of research and then recognize how many people who should have been telling you these things long time ago have actually not been friends of Noble Drew Ali, but have actually been in such organizations to stagnate you from learning these things, which is why we have these problems today. Well, Noble Drew Ali brought this to us over 110 years, 110, 11 years. And here we are getting caught with all of these sideline economic and social problems that should already been addressed decades ago. However, we're still breathing, so we ain't totally dead. So something can be done.
Well, listen, we thank you. We thank you as always. We thank you for your wisdom. We thank you for your knowledge. We thank you for your love, and we thank you for your straightforwardness. We know that you are forever our Grand Sheik, and we thank you for
built in within harmony with the laws of nature. And I know a lot of times when people are talking about constitutional principles, their mind
almost immediately goes to the fundamental principles embodied via the Constitution for the United States, which you all know comes from Honor Honesty Confederation law, i.e. Muslim law. However, it's actually deeper than that. But we want to go over in a short order, say just an introductory to fundamental divine principles, or because most of you who come here on the House of We Awakening Minds are already pretty much well groomed in fundamental, true, ancient spirituality, i.e., which also is referred to as metaphysics, etc. So much that we talk about, it's for the most part redundant. However, for many people are becoming conscious of the dynamics of the human experience right now on Midgard, etc. And many people who are becoming conscious of their Moorish bloodline and pedigree and nationality, and are making efforts to honor their mothers and fathers. Sometimes things need to be reiterated to you to bring you up to snuff a little bit. So we're going to go over a little bit of fundamental Moorish science, which is also known as Hermetic philosophy. For you know that the fundamental principles of Moorish culture is love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. So we're going to go over the Kabbalion, and many of you familiar with the Kabbalion, etc. And this gives you a little bit of background into divine law or nature's law, or what is often referred to as nature's God, etc. So we'll share a few things with the listeners. And while this is not new to most of you, it is new to some. And so I feel it's necessary so that we can be pretty much in harmony with the conversation and not necessarily be talking past each other, because we want to be talking with each other, not past each other. So the 7 Hermetic principles. Now, the principles of truth are 7. And he who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. And that's a general philosophy of ancient Hikupta, or what you refer to as ancient Egypt. And of course, from that foundation comes your world's derivative religions, etc. However, for the most part, the priesthood has not necessarily shared the fundamental principles with the people at large, but instead has entertained the practice of presenting only the anthropomorphic angle of teaching, the cosmological, hermetic laws, etc. And so most people approach their perspectives of spirituality or religion with what you call personified energies, as opposed to a knowledge of the workings of nature upon which, the laws of nature are built, etc. And so we're going to go through the 7 just to share them with you in general. Now, the 7 Hermetic principles upon which the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows. 1, the principle of mentalism. 2, the principle of correspondence. 3, the principle of vibration. 4, the principle of polarity. 5, the principle of rhythm. 6, the principle of cause and effect. 7, the principle of gender. Now, these 7 principles will be discussed and explained as we proceed with these lessons. And a short explanation of each, however, may be as well given at this point. So what we're going to do, we're just going to go over the fundamental, a rough introductory to the 7 principles, so that we can look at our experiences from a more realistic and more harmonic basis, with more attunement and attention to love and respect, and for remedy, as opposed to emotionalism or harsh feelings, etc. Now, the principle of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances which we know under the terms of, quote unquote, the material universe, and the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that is apparent to our material senses, is spirit, which is in itself an unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as an universal, infinite living mind. It also explains that all the phenomenal world or universe is simply a mental creation of the all, subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole and its parts are units, has its existence in the mind of the all, in which mind we live and move and have our being. Now, this principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of the public attention, and which, without such explanation, are non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. Now, an understanding of this great Hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to readily grasp the laws of the mental universe and to apply the same to his or her well-being and advancement. The Hermetic student is enabled to apply intellectually or intelligently the mental laws instead of using them in a haphazard manner. And with the master key in his possession, the student may unlock the many doors of the mental and psychic temple of knowledge and enter the same freely and intelligently. Now, this principle explains the true nature of energy, quote unquote, true nature of power, the true nature of matter, and why and how all these are subordinate to the mastery of the mind. And one of the old Hermetic masters wrote long ago, or many ages ago, he who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path of mastery. And these words are as true today as at the time they were first written. Without this master key, mastery is impossible, and the student knocks in vain at the many doors of the temple. Number 2, the principle of correspondence. And you know this commonly in your metaphysical and spiritual instruction as above, so below, and as below, so above, etc. And this is symbolized by the Egyptian symbol of Hex Alpha, which you see the pyramid up and the pyramid down in balance, and is also sometimes referred to as Suleiman's shield or Hex Alpha, etc. And so the principle of correspondence, this principle embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. The old Hermetic axiom ran in these words: as above, so below; as below, so above. And the grasping of this principle gives one the means of solving many dark paradoxes and hidden secrets of nature. And there are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that would otherwise be unknowable to us. And this principle is of universal application and manifestation on the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe. It is a universal law. And the ancient Hermetists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man was able to pry aside the obstacles which hid from view the unknown. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis to the extent that a glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught, just as a knowledge of the principles of geometry enables man to measure distant suns and their movements while seated in his observatory. So a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown, studying the monad. He understands the archangel. Number 3, the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Now, this principle embodies the truth that everything is in motion. Everything vibrates. Nothing is at rest. Facts which modern science endorses and which each new scientific discovery tends to verify. And yet this Hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago by the masters of ancient Hiqupta, i.e. Egypt. The principle explains that the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration, from the all, which is pure spirit, down to the grossest form of matter. All in the vibration, the higher the vibration, the higher the position of the scale. The vibration of the spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that it is practically at rest, just as a rapidly moving wheel seems to be motionless. And at the other end of the scale, there are gross forms of matter whose vibrations are so low as to seem at rest. Between those poles, or these poles, there are millions upon millions of variable and varying degrees of vibration. From the corpuscle and electron, atom, and molecule to worlds and universes, everything is in vibration or vibratory motion. And this is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration. And also on the mental planes, whose states depend upon vibrations, and even on the spiritual planes. An understanding of this principle with the appropriate formulas enables Hermetists students to control their own mental vibrations as well as those of others. And the masters who apply this principle to the conquering of natural phenomena in various ways, he who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power, says one of the old writers of ancient Hiqupta. Now, the fourth principle is the principle of polarity. And in the principle, with the principle of polarity, everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. The extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths, and all paradoxes may be reconciled. Now, this principle of polarity embodies the truth that everything is dual. Everything has two poles. Everything has its pairs of opposites, all of which were old Hermetic axioms. It explains the old paradoxes that have perplexed so many, which have been stated as follows. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. The pairs of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meet. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false, and there are two sides of everything, etc., etc., etc. It explains that in everything there are two poles or opposite aspects, and that opposites, quote unquote, are really only the two extremes of the same thing, with many varying degrees between them. And to illustrate this, heat and cold as an example, although opposites are really the same thing. The difference is consisting merely of degrees of the same thing. And look at your thermometer and see if you can discover where heat terminates and cold begins. There's no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms heat and cold simply indicate varying degrees of the same thing. And that same thing, which manifests as heat and cold, is merely a form, a variety, and rate of vibration. So heat and cold are simply the two poles of that which we call heat. And the phenomena attendant thereupon are manifestations of the principle of polarity. And the same principle manifests in the case of light and darkness, which are the same thing. The difference consisting of varying degrees between the two poles of the phenomena, where does darkness leave off and light begin? What is the difference between large and small, between hard and soft, between black and white, between sharp and dull, between noise and quiet, between high and low, between positive and negative? The principle of polarity explains these paradoxes, and no other principle can supersede it. And the same principle operates in the mental plane. And let us take a radical and extreme example, that of love and hate. Two mental states apparently totally different, and yet there are degrees of hate and degrees of love, and a middle point in which we use the term like or dislike, which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we are at a loss to know whether we like or dislike or either or neither. And all are simply degrees of the same thing, as you will see if you will but think for a moment. And more than this, and considered of more importance by the Hermeticists, it is possible to change the vibration of hate to the vibration of love in one's own mind and in the mind of others. And many of you who read these lines have personal experiences of the involuntary rapid transition from love to hate, and the reverse in your own case and that of others. And you will therefore realize the possibility of this being accomplished by the use of the will, quote unquote, the will, by means of the Hermetic formulas. Good and evil are but the poles of the same thing, and the Hermeticist understands the art of transmuting evil into good by means of an application of the principle of polarity. And in short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of the principle, or of this principle, So an understanding of this principle will enable one to change his own polarity. So this is where you apply this knowledge to change your own mood, your thoughts, your patterns, or even what you would deal with what is often referred to as self-baptism or cleansing, etc. Understand as polarity. And as well as that of others, if he or she will devote the time and the study necessary to master the art. Number 5, the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum owing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. Now, this principle embodies the truth that in everything there is a manifested and a measured motion to and fro, a flow and inflow, a swing backwards and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and low tide, between the two poles which exist in accordance with the principles of polarity described a moment ago, as we talked about earlier. Now, there are always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. And this is in the affairs of the universe, in the affairs of suns, of worlds, of men, of animals, of mind, of energy, and of matter. Now, this law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. And it is with this matter that the Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important, or of this principle most important. The Hermetists have grasped this principle, who have grasped this principle, finding its universal application, have also discovered certain means to overcome its effects in themselves, and by the use of the appropriate formulas and methods, they apply the mental law of neutralization. And they cannot annul the principle nor cause it to cease its operation, but they have learned how to escape its effect upon themselves to a certain degree, depending upon the mastery of the principle. And they have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. In this and in similar methods consist of the art of the Hermetists. Now, masters of Hermetics polarizes himself or herself at this point in which he or she desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum, which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who have attained any self-degree or degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously, but the master does this consciously and by the use of his or her will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses, who are swung backwards and forward like a pendulum. And this principle and that of polarity have been closely studied by the Hermetists, and the methods of counteracting or neutralizing and using them for an important or their form, or using them form an important part of Hermetic mental alchemy. 6, the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes this law. Now, this principle, the principle of cause and effect, embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect, an effect from every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law, that nothing ever merely happens, that there is no such thing as chance. And while there are various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating the lower planes, still nothing of or ever entirely escapes the law. The Hermetists understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect, and to a certain degree, and by mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causers instead of effect. The masses of people are carried along, obedient to environment, the wills and the desires of others stronger than themselves. Heredity, suggestion, and other outward cause moving them about their pawn or like pawns on the chessboard of life. But the masters rising to the plane of above dominates their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them, and become movers instead of pawns. And they help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by others' wills and environment. They use the principle instead of being tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule on their own plane. In this statement, there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge, and let him read who can. Number 7, the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests at all planes. Now, the principle of gender, this principle embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, the masculine and the feminine principles ever at work. And this is true not only of the physical plane, but of the mental plane and even the spiritual planes. And on the physical plane, this principle manifests as sex. On a higher plane, it takes higher forms, but the principle is ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many a subject and that has perplexed the minds of men. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains the two elements or principles, or this great principle within it, him or her. And every male thing has the female element also, and every female contains also the male principle. And if you would understand the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, generation, and regeneration, you must understand and study this Hermetic principle. It contains the solution to many mysteries of life. And we caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices which are taught under fanciful titles, and which are a proposition or a prostitution of the great natural principles of gender. And such base revivals of the ancient infamous forms of phallicism tend to ruin mind, body, and soul. And the Hermetist philosophy has ever sounded the warning against these degraded teachings, which tend toward lust, licentiousness, and perversion of nature's principles. And if you seek such teachings, you must go elsewhere for them. Hermeticism contains nothing for you along those lines. To the pure, all things are pure. To the base, all things are base. Now we share with you those 7 principles or Hermetic principles to give you a foundation, truthfully, of the laws of nature and nature's God, because that's exactly what it is. However, in order to look at the politics or the interactions of human society at Midgard, and of course, many of the problems that we have, it is also important for those of you who are in forms of scholarship in philosophy and in linguistic communications, etc., to be always cognizant of the 7 Hermetic laws or 7 principles. Therefore, you must have a knowledge of the laws of nature in order to understand the true foundations of what you would call orderly or de jure government, distinguished from de facto, or what you would call the base activities of men in their lower self, etc. And also with the knowledge of this, you would have a better comprehension and method for analyzing the higher self and the lower self in Moorish science and Moorish philosophy, based on principles unmoving, unchanging, for they are the principles of the phenomena of the universe, etc. So I repeat again, and we will consider 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, the principle of mentalism. 2, the principle of correspondence. 3, the principle of vibration. 4, the principle of polarity. 5, the principle of rhythm. 6, the principle of cause and effect. 7, the principle of gender. Now that is fundamentally the foundation of all those who know fundamental civilization on Earth, etc. So if you're talking about or researching ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Eritrea, ancient Egypt, ancient Sudan, ancient Nubia, ancient Hykupta, ancient Egypt, etc., ancient Greece. So when you're talking Greece, you're still talking Ethiopia. So do not be mixed with the diversionary reconstructed history as taught to people. So when you're talking so-called Greek, you're talking still ancient Ethiopia, etc. The philosophy is one. And when you look at the variables and the flavors of the way they have been taught, as you have transliterations into different linguistic forms, sometimes people are under the impression that the fundamental rules or the laws change, and the laws actually don't change nor pass away. They remain the same. And so it is important for you to have a knowledge of the Hermetic laws in order to understand constitutional construction in civilized government, also the constitutional construction in all true religious, cosmological religious orders of the ancient world, and also coming down to the modern or the contemporary world. And most of your contamination has been by virtue of less than honorable men who have pretty much tried to debase the fundamental knowledge for selfish gain. And of course, this is, again, the motivation for why a lot of the activity for human liberation that's taking place right now on the planet Midgard. And of particular interest, logically, is the Moorish Dubani national movement of the world, covering the grand efforts in a general manner for the uplifting of fallen humanity, etc. And so we're going to talk about a lot of the negative activities that's taking place at the North Gate, because this is at the hub of both the knowledge, although the knowledge is worldwide, much of the negative activity that's taking place at Midgard has been initiated from around the world. But this is the North Gate is one of the major, what you call, geographical locations from which the dark priesthood have been operating to create misery on the planet for selfish gain, etc. And so this is where we come into discussing the negative activities at the North Gate. And keep in mind, one of the keys to the corrupt operatives who have been doing business at the Maghreb or at the West or at the North Gate are very well aware of these principles. This is another reason why we present in a synopsis or share a synopsis of those principles to you all. And while we're aware that many of you have all already been pretty much spiritually grounded in this knowledge, we also know that many have not been. And this is so that we can all start working together and more harmonically in solving or bringing some remedy or balance to the intersocial, political, and economic operations at Midgard as transitions are being made on the planet, etc. And as many of you already know, many of the obstacles that have been in place at Midgard for quite some time, some of them have been removed. Some beings in their physical form, some of the institutions that have been grounded, very entrenched, pretty much so, are actually being dissolved. And of course, because we're creatures of habit, this becomes very uncomfortable for all of us because we've been groomed into many false paradigms, and we built our lives around many false paradigms and many false concepts, etc. And so this cleansing, or this baptism, as you might call it, or rebalancing of the vibrations, etc., while in fact both necessary and also harmonic with the operations of nature in the Aquarian energy, logically still is uncomfortable for many people. So some of the things that we've been discussing over the years with you concerning those matters, keep in mind, one of the things that we are desiring for you to do is start taking control of yourself. And Dr. Naila has been doing, as many of you who've been following some of her walks, when, you know, I say going for a ride with Dr. G, has hit on a lot of these things. And this will give you more of a grounding on how to handle that information without emotionalism, or without looking at it as just mere opinion, because she deals with those principles for years, etc. And so it's only fair that we share some of them with you all so that you can better help us, and we help you, and we help each other in making this planet a better place while we're going through this transition.
Grinchy, I may interject. We one of the things that prompted this particular topic is the fact that on November 2nd, 2020, President Donald Trump issued an executive order.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring that. I want to bring that up on a computer too.
Yeah, 13958.
Yeah.
In the very So I did put that in the link for it in the chat. So I'm not sure if people caught on to what, so that they could actually pull it up.
Yeah.
But the ramifications, so to speak, on this, I'm not even sure. You know, since we're in a transition period, one of the things, we're in transition, so it could very well be that other executive orders could follow from the new administration that could counter.
The new administration is really the activity and not the person or personage. You know, now many of you know that I told you before that Donald Trump is assigned, and I understand what you're seeing in the mainstream news, etc. But I stand on what I said. I know what they're saying to people, and I'm not saying trust me. I'm standing on what I said, and I don't change.
Okay.
You know, now it's executive order.
Do you want me to read some of it, or you want to read it?
Executive order.
I have it up. Yeah. 13958.
Now, of course, we already know that that's the advisory. Many of you who know about the advisory committee, and notice that they talk about the 1776 advisory commission. Now, before we get into this, I want for you all to be reminded for background research, you know, because a lot of things that may be touched on here and there, and some things that we've touched on actually previously, we won't be able to necessarily go over tonight necessarily, but we're depending on many of you who have been you know, walking with us for the last 11, 12 years here at the House of Reawakening Minds, and those of you who have yourselves taken the responsibility of doing research and scholarship in the matters of our people here at North America, and of course of the positive and negative operations that have both injured and distracted the people, etc. We remind you, in relationship to the politics that's been happening on our land in the recent century, to always make reference to your knowledgeable background of the Organic Act of Congress of 1871, February the 2nd. It's important because these things must be put in perspective. Because I think a lot of times when people are looking at the politics, we actually approach it from a pigeonhole type mentality based on mainstream communications, which is for the most part for mind control, etc. And understand from hermetic recognition of cause and effect that certain things which are said or presented to the masses for mind control purposes, when you look at it from a more spiritual or hermetic point of view, you already know that even though they may tell you one thing, that the mathematics of the universe will disallow certain things. And this is, again, why certain things are said for those who have eyes to see, that in spite of what it may appear to the masses, you stand on certain principles irregardless, because the truth don't change or pass away. But anyway, let's look at Executive Order 113958. And this order establishing the President's Advisory of 1776 Commission.
You mean the 13958 or different?
13, pardon me,
13, yeah.
I apologize. 13958 Executive Order. So we call it 13958. So by the authority vested in me, this is in reference to the President for the corporation. And at this time, it must be understood. So I want to present this to everyone while we're reading this so that you stay very clear. Presidents are the CEO or the heads of corporations. Nation states have prime ministers, so keep that in mind. So understand also the de facto operations that have been taking place on the land since 1871, actually 1861. And we redundantly would remind you of these things. And I think a lot of times when we do that, when we're going into different subject matters and people recognize the redundancy of it all, those who see know it's necessary, because we know that most of the time when we mention these things to the people, most of the time they're not really paying attention to what we're saying, because they're not looking at things from multiple levels at the same time. But nevertheless, we're reminding you that we have reminded you of that constantly. So by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, and in order to better enable a rising generation to understand the history and principles of the founding of the United States in 1776, and through this form a more perfect union, it is hereby ordered as follows. Section 1, Purpose. The American founding envisioned a political order in harmony with the design of the laws of nature and of nature's God, seeing the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as embodied in and sanctioned by the natural law and its traditions. The formation of a republic around these principles marked a clear departure from previous forms of government, securing rights through a form of government that derives its legitimate power from the consent of the governed. Throughout its national life, our republic's exploration of the full meaning of these principles has led it through the ratification of a constitution, civil war, the abolition of slavery, Reconstruction, and a series of domestic crises and world conflicts. These events established a clear historical record of an exceptional nation dedicated to the ideas and ideals of its founding. Against this history, in recent years, a series of polemics grounded in poor scholarship has vilified our founders and our founding. Despite the virtues and accomplishments of this nation, many students are now taught in school to hate their own country and to believe that the men and women who built it were not heroes, but rather villains. And this radicalized view of American history lacks perspective, obscures virtues, twists motives, ignores or distorts facts, and magnifies flaws, resulting in the truth being concealed and history disfigured. Failing to identify, challenge, and correct this distorted perspective could fray and ultimately erase the bonds that knit our country and culture together. The recent attacks on our founding have highlighted America's history related to race. And these one-sided and diverse accounts too often ignore or fail to properly honor and recollect the great legacy of the American national experience, our country's valiant and successful effort to shake off the curse of slavery and to use the lessons of that struggle to guide our work toward equal rights for all citizens in the present. And viewing America as an irredeemably and systematically racist country cannot account for the extraordinary role of the great heroes of the American movement against slavery and for civil rights, a great moral endeavor that Abraham Lincoln to Martin Luther King Jr. was marked by religious fellowship, goodwill, generosity of heart, an emphasis on our shared principles, and an exclusive vision for the future. As these heroes demonstrated, the path to a renewed and confident national unity is through a rediscovery of a shared identity rooted in our founding principles. A loss of national confidence in these principles would place rising generations in jeopardy of a crippling self-doubt that could cause them to abandon faith in the common story that binds us to one another across our differences. Without our common faith in the equal right of every individual American to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, authoritarian visions of government and society could become increasingly alluring alternatives to self-government based on the consent of the people. And thus it is necessary to provide America's youth or young people across what is genuinely inspiring and unifying in our history, as well as the lessons imparted by the American experience of overcoming great national challenges. And this is what makes possible the informed and honest patriotism that is essential for a successful republic. A restoration of American education grounded in the principles of our founding that is accurate, honest, unifying, inspiring, and ennobling must ultimately succeed at the local level. Parents and local school boards must be empowered to achieve greater choice and variety in curriculum at the state and local levels. The role of the federal government is to protect and preserve state and local control over the curriculum, program of instruction, administration, and personnel of educational institutions, schools, and school systems. Instead, that is why my administration rejects the Common Core curriculum of all efforts to have the federal government impose a national curriculum or national standards in education. Vigorous participation in local government has always been America's laboratory of liberty and a key to what makes us exceptional. And the best way to preserve the story of America's founding principles is to live in its action by local communities, reasserting control of how children receive patriotic education in their schools, Section 2, the President's Advisory 1776 Commission. A, within 120 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Education shall establish in the Department of Education the President's Advisory 1776 Commission, the 1776 Commission, quote unquote, to better enable a rising generation to understand the history and principles of the founding of the United States in 1776 and to strive to form a more perfect union. B, the 1776 Commission shall be composed of not more than 20 members, who shall be appointed by the President. Members shall serve for a term of 2 years and shall not be removed except for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance. The 1776 Commission may include individuals from outside the federal government with relevant experience or subject matter expertise. The 1776 Commission shall also include the following ex officio members or such senior officials as those members may designate. 1, Secretary of State. 2, Secretary of Defense. 3, Secretary of the Interior. 4, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. 5, the Secretary of Education. 6, the Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy. And 7, the Assistant to the President for Intergovernmental Affairs. C, the 1776 Commission shall, 1, produce a report for the President within 1 year of the date of this order, which shall be publicly disseminated regarding the core principles of the American founding and how these principles may be understood to further enjoyment of the blessings of liberty, quote unquote, and to promote our striving to form a more perfect union, quote unquote. The Commission may solicit statements and contributions from intellectual and cultural figures in addition to the views of the Commission members. 2, advise and offer recommendations to the President and the United States Semi-Quincentennial Commission regarding the federal government's plan to celebrate the 250th anniversary of American independence and coordinate with relevant external stakeholders on their plans. 3, facilitate the development and implementation of a quote-unquote Presidential 1776 Award to recognize student knowledge of the American founding, including knowledge about the founders, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitutional Convention, and the great soldiers and battles of the American Revolutionary War. 4, advise executive departments and agencies, quote-unquote, that's emphasized with regard to their efforts to ensure patriotic education, meaning the presentation of the history of the American founding and foundational principles. The examination of how the United States has grown closer to those principles throughout its history, and the explanation of why commitment to America's aspirations is beneficial and justified is provided to the public at national parks, battlefields, monuments, museums, installations, landmarks, cemeteries, and other places important to the American Revolution and the American founding as appropriate and consistent with applicable law. 5, advise agencies in prioritizing the American founding and federal grants and initiatives, including those described in Section 4 of this order, and as appropriate and consistent with the application or applicable law. And 6, facilitate, advise upon, and promote other activities to support public knowledge and patriotic education on the American Revolution and the American founding as appropriate and consistent with applicable law. D, the 1776 Commission shall have a chair and vice chair designated by the President from among its members, an executive director designated by the Secretary of Education in consultation with the Assistant of the President for Domestic Policy, shall coordinate the work of the 1776 Commission. And the chair and the vice chair shall work with the executive director to convene regular meetings of the 1776 Commission, determine its agenda, and direct its work consistent with this order. E, the Department of Education shall provide funding and administrative support for the 1776 Commission to the extent permitted by law and subject to the availability of appropriations. F, members of the 1776 Commission shall serve without compensation, but shall be reimbursed for travel expenses, including per diem in lieu of subsistence, as authorized by law for persons serving intermittently in government service, 5 U.S.C. 5701-5707. G, insofar as the Federal Advisory Committee Act, as amended at 5 U.S.C. Applied, may apply to the 1776 Commission and any functions of the President under that act, except that of reporting to the Congress, shall be performed by the Secretary of Education in accordance with the guidelines issued by the Administrator of General Services. H, the 1776 Commission shall terminate 2 years from the date of this order, unless extended by the President. Section 3, celebration of Constitution Day. All relevant agencies shall monitor compliance with Title I of Division J of the Public Law 108-4-447, which provides that each educational institution that receives federal funds from a fiscal year shall hold an educational program on the United States Constitution on September 17th of such year for the students served by the education institution, including by verifying compliance with each educational institution that receives federal funds. All relevant agencies shall take action as appropriate to enhance compliance with that law. Section 4, prioritize the American founding in available federal resources. The following agencies shall prioritize federal resources consistent with applicable law to promote patriotic education. A, the Department of Education through the American History and Civics Academics and American History and Civics Education National Activities. B, the Department of Defense through the pilot program on enhanced civics education. And C, the Department of State through the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs and through opportunities in the Fulbright U.S. Speakers and International Visitors Leadership Programs, as well as in American Spaces. Section 5, general provisions. A, nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect, 1, the authority granted by the law to an executive department or agency, or the head thereof, or 2, the functions of the director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. B, and this order